The Vroth Imperium had crushed every species that dared stand before it. Their empire spanned 1,000 light-years, their war fleets eclipsed stars, and their warriors were bred for destruction. For centuries they had known no equal. Until they met humanity. It started as a misunderstanding. The Vroth High General Zalzoroth had delivered an ultimatum to the humans: surrender Earth or be annihilated. But instead of an immediate declaration of war, the humans hesitated. They stalled negotiations, debated among themselves, and sent diplomats instead of soldiers. To the Vroth this was cowardice. A species that refused to fight was unworthy of existence. So, standing before the Galactic Council, Zalzoroth broadcast his message to every race that watched in silence. Humans are weak. Their leaders cower behind words. Their warriors fear the battlefield. They do not deserve to stand among us. They are a stain upon the stars. The council chamber buzzed with murmurs, species whispering to one another. Humanity, newly inducted into the galactic community, was young but not insignificant. They had established colonies, built respectable fleets, and maintained uneasy alliances. But now their pride was at stake. Earth's ambassador Admiral Elias Voss sat expressionless. He was a man of war, a veteran of Earth's darkest conflicts. He had fought in orbital skirmishes, survived planetary invasions, and had killed more than his share of enemies. But here in this council chamber he was not a soldier. He was a diplomat. The room grew silent. Voss finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. General Zalzoroth, you misunderstand us. Humanity does not fear war. We do not hesitate because we are weak. He leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto the reptilian warlord. We hesitate because war with us is a mistake. The chamber was still. The tension was thick, the weight of his words sinking in. Zalzoroth bared his fangs in a snarl. A mistake. He scoffed. You have no empire. Your fleets are pitiful. Your soldiers are few. What could your kind possibly do to us? Admiral Voss only smiled. Send your army. We will send one. The council erupted in whispers. Zalzoroth's expression twisted in confusion. One? He repeated in disbelief. You mock us, human? Voss leaned back, calm and certain. One soldier is enough. The challenge was set. The Vroth Imperium had never been insulted like this before. A single human soldier? Against their war machine? It was a joke, a disgrace. Zalzoroth was furious. Within hours of Admiral Voss's declaration, the Vroth Imperium mobilized. The humans had challenged their honor and they would answer with force. The invasion fleet, one of the largest the Imperium had ever assembled for a single operation, began its journey toward Erebus 7, a human-controlled colony near the galactic border. Zalzoroth would personally lead the assault. It would not be a battle. It would be a massacre. The human response. As the Vroth fleet surged through space, humanity remained eerily silent. The Galactic Council watched in anticipation. Would the humans send an armada? Would they call upon their allies? Would they beg for peace? No. Humanity did nothing. Except for a single transmission, sent directly to Zalzoroth's command ship. We have chosen our soldier. He will be waiting. Zalzoroth sneered at the message. Arrogance. He would break them for this. The landing at Erebus 7. The invasion began at dawn local time. The Vroth fleet descended upon Erebus 7 with overwhelming force. 30 warships, thousands of drop pods, and an army of 50,000 elite soldiers. The humans had made no attempt to evacuate the colony. No defensive measures were in place. No orbital defense cannons activated. There was no resistance. The Vroth landed unopposed. Zalzoroth stepped onto the battlefield, his massive frame covered in the black and red armor of the Imperium. He expected to see trembling civilians, desperate pleas for mercy. Instead he found silence. The colony was abandoned. And then he saw him. A single human stood in the center of the landing zone. He was unarmored. No weapons were visible. He didn't flinch as the Vroth forces surrounded him. Zalzoroth approached, his soldiers forming a perimeter. He towered over the human, his claws twitching with anticipation. So, this is your warrior? The general sneered. This is your best? The human smiled. And then the killing began. The soldier of Earth. The first Vroth to move was a battle-scarred warrior named Krolvass. A veteran of 100 campaigns, he had crushed the skulls of countless enemies. He lunged, plasma blade flashing. And died before he could even scream. The human moved like a ghost. One step, one strike. A hand lashed out, twisting Krolvass's wrist, snapping bones like twigs. The plasma blade fell, caught midair, turned, driven into the Vratha's throat. The corpse hit the ground. The other warriors hesitated. Zalzoroth himself froze. That speed. That precision. That ease. The human looked at them, calm as death itself. Send the next one. A dozen warriors attacked. None survived. The human was a blur. Every movement was deliberate, every strike lethal. Plasma blades were redirected, rifles turned against their wielders. Jaws were shattered, chests caved in. Vrath warriors, elite among their kind, died faster than they could react. Panic rippled through the ranks. Oh, how was this possible? The Vrath outnumbered him 10,000 to 1. And yet, he stood among their dead, untouched. Zalzorotha's mind raced. This isn't normal. This isn't human. This was something else. Something terrifying. The fear of the Vrath. For the first time in his life, Zalzoroth felt it. Fear. The warrior before him was no ordinary human. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a weapon. His movements were beyond natural. Predicting attacks before they happened, turning the battlefield into a slaughterhouse. And then the human spoke. Your mistake wasn't calling us cowards. Your mistake was thinking we only had soldiers. He took a step forward. The Vrath stepped back. Zalzoroth snarled, trying to suppress the unease curling in his gut. This was impossible. No species could fight like this. No soldier could be this powerful. Unless the humans had been lying all along. Unless this wasn't a soldier. Unless this was something much, much worse. Zalzoroth had come expecting to fight an army. Instead, he had brought his empire to face a nightmare. And the nightmare had only just begun. Zalzorotha's forces had landed on Erebus, 7 expecting conquest. Instead, they had walked into a massacre. The human weapon, whatever he was, moved like a phantom through their ranks. No armor. No advanced technology. Just raw, terrifying skill. The battlefield, once filled with the roars of the Vrath warriors, was now eerily silent, punctuated only by the sound of bodies hitting the ground. The Vrath had started with 50,000 troops. Now, in less than an hour they were down to less than 10,000. And the humans still hadn't slowed down. The fall of the Vrath army. Zalzoroth watched in disbelief as his elites, his finest warriors, were erased from existence. They had brought heavy weapons. They had brought war machines. None of it mattered. The human tore through armored units like paper. Tanks exploded before they could fire a shot. Plasma bolts were dodged with impossible precision. Every blade, every bullet, every attempt to kill him failed. And then something even more terrifying happened. The Vrath began to retreat. Zalzoroth felt rage boil inside him. The warriors of the Imperium did not retreat. They fought until death, until their enemies lay broken beneath their feet. But here on this world, death came too quickly. The human wasn't just killing them, he was breaking them. Vrath warriors threw down their weapons. Some turned and ran. Some collapsed to their knees, begging for mercy. Zalzoroth could only stare, his claws trembling. This is not possible, he whispered. He had seen 1,000 battlefields. He had crushed entire civilizations beneath his feet. He had never known fear until now. Because standing before him wasn't a soldier. It was a predator. And the hunt was far from over. A message to the Imperium. Zalzorotha's command ship, hovering above Erebus 7, had watched the horror unfold in real time. His officers, once confident in their inevitable victory, now stood in stunned silence. The battlefield was a graveyard. One human. Tens of thousands of Vrath dead. The Imperium had never suffered a loss like this before. Zalzoroth activated his emergency comms. He had to call for reinforcements. An entire fleet. If one human could do this, what would happen if more arrived? He opened a channel to the Imperial High Command. And then the human disappeared. One moment he was standing in the blood-soaked field. The next he was gone. Zalzoroth barely had time to react before. The lights in his warship flickered. A chill ran down his spine. No, that's not possible. His comms officer let out a strangled scream. He's here. The officer's head snapped to the side as something blurred through the air. Blood splattered across the control panel. Zalzoroth turned, slowly, heart pounding. And there he was. The human. Standing inside his command center. Zalzorotha's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. No teleportation technology. No breach alarms. He had just appeared. Like a ghost. A shadow. A nightmare. Zalzorotha's warriors lunged at him. The human didn't even move, he simply let them come. and they died. The bridge became a slaughterhouse. Zalzaratha's own bodyguards, hand-picked warriors, the strongest of the strong, were obliterated in seconds. Their bodies crumpled, throats crushed, weapons turned against them. And then finally Zalzorath was alone. The fall of the general. Zalzorath staggered back, his mind racing. He had to fight. He had to do something. But he already knew the truth. It was over. The human stood before him, expressionless. Not tired. Not wounded. Untouched. Like he had only just begun. "What are you?" Zalzorath whispered. The human finally spoke. "You called us cowards." The room grew colder. "You thought we hesitated out of fear." He stepped closer. Zalzorath couldn't move. His claws twitched, his instincts screaming at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. "We hesitated because we wanted to give you a choice. Another step. We wanted to spare you from what we can do." The truth settled like a weight in Zalzoratha's chest. They had never needed an army. They had never needed warships or fleets or planets full of troops. Because what the humans did have was something far worse. Something the galaxy had never seen before. A weapon in human form. Something unstoppable. Something that had just destroyed the mightiest army in the galaxy. Alone. Zalzorath fell to his knees. His vision swam. He could hear alarms blaring, feel the ship tilting off course, his empire crumbling around him. The human crouched, looking him in the eye. And then, in a voice colder than the void, he whispered, "Run." And Zalzorath did. He activated his emergency evac pod, ejecting himself into space, fleeing like a wounded animal. The last thing he saw before the hatch closed was the human smiling. Zalzoratha's escape pod rocketed through the void, spinning uncontrollably as it fled the battlefield. The general's claws trembled as he gripped the controls, his chest heaving. His mind, hardened by centuries of war, could not comprehend what had happened. He had come to Erebus 7 expecting victory. Instead he had fled like a coward. And worse, he had left his entire army behind to die. The silent battlefield. From the safety of space, Zalzorath watched as his command ship lost power. The massive warship, one of the most advanced in the Vroth fleet, now drifted lifelessly in orbit. It was over. 50,000 of his warriors, his finest soldiers, all gone. Slaughtered by one. The planet below was silent. The once proud army of the Imperium had been wiped from existence. There were no distress calls. No survivors sending SOS beacons. There was only silence. Zalzoratha's breath hitched. This isn't possible. He forced himself to think. If he could warn the Imperium, if he could tell the Emperor what had happened, they could retaliate. They could send an even greater force, millions of troops, an entire armada. The Imperium would drown Earth in fire. But then his console beeped. An incoming transmission. His blood ran cold. Because it wasn't coming from the Imperium. It was coming from the human. A warning to the galaxy. The screen flickered. Zalzoratha's breath caught in his throat. The human stood there, completely calm. Not a single scratch on him. As if he hadn't just annihilated an entire army. "You lost." His voice was calm, certain. "You called us cowards. You thought we were weak. That was a mistake." Zalzorath felt his heart hammering against his chest. "You wanted war. We sent one soldier. And that was enough." The human leaned forward. "Do not come for us again." The screen cut to black. And then, Zalzorath received a final message. A simple file sent to every Vroth warship across the Imperium. It was the recording of the battle. Everything. The slaughter. The impossible speed. The Vroth warriors running in terror. The generals. The warlords. The Emperor himself. They would all see what happened here. They would all see what a single human could do. The fall of the Imperium. The Vroth Imperium had ruled for centuries. Their fleets had crushed countless civilizations. Their armies had conquered entire sectors. But after Erebus 7, everything changed. Word of the massacre spread. The mighty Vroth warriors, once feared across the stars, became a joke. No one feared them anymore. Because the galaxy now knew the truth. The Vroth hadn't lost to an army. They had lost to one. And if humanity could do this with one, what would happen if they sent more? The Imperium collapsed within a decade. Planets rebelled. Enemies attacked. The once mighty empire crumbled into dust. And humanity? They never sent another soldier. They didn't have to. The Vroth never dared attack them again. No one did. Because every species in the galaxy had seen the recording. They all knew what humans were capable of. And they all knew. One soldier is enough. The Void Narratives. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more sci-fi tales of humanity's strength, resilience, and terrifying potential. The void is vast, but so is our imagination. Rocket.